Welcome to The Point with Mick Rich. Great to have you back. Great to be in your living room. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in our state, in our country. First of all, I want to just mention about Rush Limbaugh. What an icon. What a gentleman. That is an individual, whether you care for his positions or not, but anytime somebody has such a huge impact on the country and the world, it's time to take pause and recognize that individual for what he's contributed to our country. I'm always learn more from someone that I don't agree with than I do with someone that I just nod all the time. But for me, with Rush Limbaugh, and I look at what he's done, but when we talk about his listeners, I think Barack Obama summed up Rush Limbaugh's listeners. Those individuals that cling to their guns and Bibles. But for him, when he said that was a put down for Rush Limbaugh. He goes, those are my people. I got to say, those are my people as well. Rush Limbaugh was the first one who successfully stood up against the oppression of the elites. And if you notice, I've been talking about the elites of our country and our state for a number of weeks now, and I want to make that clear that Rush Limbaugh was just an average Joe. That's why people connected with him, and that's why he connected. They listened to him because he said, that's my guy. When he looked at when he saw and he stood up for what wasn't right, he stood up for those things. He stood up for all of it across the board. That is why he described himself as the most dangerous man in America. Because he stood up for all Americans that said, your voice counts. Your voice is important. When I will be talking about it this next 3 segments is about how important it is to listen to the minority view. And what I mean by that is it's not about listening to a person of a different color. It's about making sure that the minority party, if you're in California, that you stop and listen to what the Republicans, the conservatives have to say. If you're in a conservative area, you stop and listen to what the Democrats, the liberals have to say. Because it's important that as long as we're staying open, we're going to be an open and free country. And Rush knew that, and he was a lightning rod for those. And I tell you what, we're going to miss him. I will miss Rush Limbaugh. My condolences go to his family. So, want to talk a little bit about the environmental elitist. We talked about it last week. I just want to highlight a couple things. First of all, when we talked about the dangers of being so dependent on renewables in one source, then you become vulnerable. When we look at the power companies, we expect the power companies, I do, to provide effective, safe energy that's across the board and reliable. If we're only dependent on 1 or 2 and those go down for whatever reason, it's a problem. In Texas is a prime example. The wind turbines are down, the solar panels are covered over, and they're going through blackouts. And it's not a matter they don't have enough windmills or turbines or solar panels. Then lastly, I just read this past week that Bloomberg, and this is Michael Bloomberg's paper, his magazine, Bloomberg, talking about dealing with the disposal of the turbine blades. What a huge impact that is. They can't be recycled. All they can do is cut them up and put them in a landfill. So this is not what we call a renewable material. And then lastly, what we're seeing now is that gas prices are climbing. It's not surprising. This is what's happening. We're soon to hit $3 a gallon gas. Wasn't it nice when gasoline was under $2? And then lastly, we've seen it Iran knows that their power is going to be surging back to them. And they just recently launched a missile attack on our folks in Erbil, Iraq. And our president's doing nothing about it right now. You can see it coming. All of us could see it coming. And this isn't right. We need to do something about it. Later in the segments, we're going to be talking about how to open up our elections. But one of the things that needs to be addressed is political dynasties. And we don't have a king or queen, but in certain instances, we might as well. And you might wonder, what does a political dynasty look like? Well, that's a Como dynasty. Rockefeller, Kennedy, Clinton, and Bush. That's on a national level. On a local level, on a national level, it's the Lujan, Chavez, King, Udall dynasties. I'm looking at this, I'm saying, where's the Republican dynasty? When you're Republicans and you're doing as poorly as we are, nobody says, I want to follow you. That's just the name of the game. But what does it mean? What does it really look like when we talk about what's the downside of a political dynasty? Political elites want to make sure that they are against the transfer of wealth. That's why they want to do the death test. That's why they want to do these other things. Nowhere are they saying that we need to make sure that the political entities, the political families don't continue generation after generation. You may wonder, what does a political dynasty look like? Well, let's talk about Governor Mario Cuomo. That is Andrew Cuomo's father, Chris Cuomo's dad, right? He was the first governor of New York. And then we have Andrew Cuomo. You may not know this, but he married a Kennedy. And this isn't, when we talk about it, this isn't a unique situation. This happens where it's kind of like in Europe during the royalty where they had intermarriages. I'm thinking who knows what will happen with the intermarriages between the different entities. But you do see that with Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo marrying a Kennedy. And then when we talk about it, then you have that. Well, how does it happen? It transfers from one to the next. Well, it has to do, you get introduced as a child to the politically powerful. You end up interacting, talking to back and forth. You travel in the circles of the political elites. You travel, the economical powerful want to interact with the politically powerful. So these people all interact with one another. That's how they get the funding for their campaigns. And then the first move, what happens is that you see it happening where all of a sudden, and we see it in our own state, and that has to do with, take a look at it, Michelle Lujan Grisham. What did she do? She started out as Secretary of Health with Governor Richardson. Then she became a county commissioner, then a congressman, then a governor. Then take a look at Bingaman. Where's his son? John Bingaman was the chief of staff for the governor. Where's he at today? He's in Biden's administration. So what do we need to do? So what happens is that these individuals aren't part of the people. They're not part of, they're not going to public schools. They're not going to our public universities. They're going out of state, whether it's Southern Cal, whether it's Northern California, going out to the East Coast, West Coast. They're going to those elite schools where they are able to mingle with other elites. So number one is we need to break it up, plain and simple. And I keep saying plain and simple because it's not difficult to understand. It's a simple concept. It's very plain. So what we need to do is we're going to have to pry the power out of their hands, their finger. They're not going to let go of that trigger no matter what. It's up to us. So we need to call them out on it, saying we're done of you promoting from one to the other. Companies have it where you can't have your child working under or working for you, or we got to break that cycle. Number two is my kids end up having to work for other companies. My kids went in different directions. I made a point that they just didn't fall in behind me. Number two, I made sure that our kids had a rounded education where my kids ended up being part of the community, not separate from the community. We need to elect strong, we need to make sure that we elect strong political leaders that can break the cycle. We saw what happened with President Trump out in Washington. He was to drain the swamp. Tell you what, you know, the old saying goes, you know, it's hard to remember that when you're up to your neck in alligators, that the goal is to drain the swamp. I get that. You got to be a strong enough person. It's up to the next president, Republican president, to drain the swamp. And we got to keep electing people to do it, whether it's in Washington or it's in Santa Fe. And then we got to get the people involved. I'm tired of the lobbyists having control. It's up to us. I'm excited about this. I see President Trump has energized a new generation, and it's up to us to help them across the threshold. I'm Mick Rich, and this is To the Point. Thank you very much.
Middle of the field and some room, a move at the 20 and all the way, touchdown.
Cleveland tonight sputtered at times, but when they got it going, just like right there. To the 5, touchdown Cleveland. Down and 10 here. Play action, looking, throws it out deep, has a man out there, ball is caught. To the 10, to the house, and just like that, the Cleveland Storm answer.
Away. Johnson, and now it's sent back post, and that is dangerous. It's by everyone, and then it's headed in. And so a misclearance.
They're going to give it. There goes Thompson trying to turn the corner and does. Thompson at the 15, 10, 5. Waiting for the call. Touchdown, Mayfield Trojans. Robertson will push it to Hobart on the far side. Tipped over the double block. Pancaked off the floor beautifully by Gonzalez Sanchez, and we're still going. Here's Hobart. She'll go over the double block. Lucero. Jones will send it. Tough set. Lucero has to get it over. Robertson. She'll push it over the block. Save. The left-handed save there by Lucero. Here's Jones. She'll have a swing. Yes. McIntosh. Excuse me, at the front.
Stepping up in the pocket and moving, and now to the 5 and diving towards the end zone and in.
Oh man, this beat is crazy.
Hobart. Jones. She'll set Mack for the championship. Yes! 5 in a row. La Cueva is the city's best yet again.
Maybe not getting the reps he needed at quarterback. The wide open guy.
There's a big move by Rodriguez. Look out as he's down the sideline. A
Trouble.
cut, shot out of a cannon. Ivan Rodriguez, he's got all the speed. Can he break away inside the 10 to
And
the
he's gonna
5
make it.
and in? Touchdown.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich. I have Bob Perls here with me. Bob, from what I can tell, has been a lifelong Democrat. He's, served our state and our country well. He worked in the, what was it? Bob, you were a state representative for what, 1 term, 2 terms?
Yeah, I was a 2-term state representative way back in the 90s.
And then also you just recently ran for Sandoval County, what was it, county clerk.
Yeah, I'd run for Congress in 2000 for the Public Regulation Commission in 2004, and then county clerk recently, mostly because of all the work I've been doing on election reform issues over the last 6 years.
Okay, so you've run a successful campaign. You've lost a few. You've won a big one, one bigger than I ever have. I got to say congratulations on that. Way to go! But one of the questions that I wanted to talk to you about on our program is that you've been a lifelong Democrat. When you were running for the Sandoval County as a Democrat, you also, it looks like, did you also have at the same time New Mexico open elections?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit that I founded in 2015 when I came back from serving abroad with the State Department.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you spend a lot of time as a diplomat talking about American democracy and how America is really the beacon for the world. And then you come back home and the reality is very different. It's, you become deeply patriotic, but at the same time, you want to help America be better. And being almost a native New Mexican certainly helped New Mexico be better. And one of the best ways to improve our country and the state is to have a better functioning democracy. So I founded New Mexico Open Elections with the hope of implementing major election reform over the last 5 or 6 years and going forward. It's been difficult and frustrating, as you know, because it's hyper-partisan, and it's difficult to get to the two sides to talk to each other. So we can talk more about that if you like.
Right. The question that I have is, from what I gather, what you're talking about with New Mexico open elections is allowing an open primary where independents can vote in either Democrat or Republican, but does that also mean that Democrats can vote in Republican or Republican vote in Democrat primaries?
Well, just to clarify, New Mexico open elections has a range of issues from open primaries to ranked choice voting to ending gerrymandering to looking at the way the legislature functions and even Congress functions. We've also gotten very involved in election administration, election security, looking at how to run elections truly on a nonpartisan basis. So to go back to your question about open primaries, we've run several different versions over the years. 41 states have some version of open primaries. The most limited version is a bill that we have in fact to pass, which would allow independents, or as we call them in New Mexico, declined estates, to choose a partisan primary. So 25% of New Mexicans are registered as independents to a voting booth on election and say, hey, I want to vote for, I want a Republican ballot, Democrat ballot. Now, there are other versions throughout the country, and we've run legislation like this that would not send primaries. For example, Alaska just passed what's called the Top 4 bill that allows all candidates, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Greens, Libertarians, to run in a unified or blanket nonpartisan primary. And the top 4 go to the general, and then in the general, ranked choice voting is used. So people can say, hey, the Republicans, my first choice, the Democrats, my second choice, the Independents, my third choice. So
Bob, I hear what you're saying. I look at California, a lot of things come out of California. I see what's happened in California is they have that almost similar to what you're talking about. And what that's done is it's turned into California into a one-party state. And if we look at the direction California is going in, It's got the tightest lockdown. The economy is suffering. You've got rampant homelessness. The state is a disaster. People are leaving it in droves. Is this a direction? I'm not quite sure. Is this a direction you're saying we should go in?
Well, obviously, economy to go in that direction, but I believe in data-driven decisions, and there are, from NCSL to National Conference of State Legislators to other independent observers, since Top 2 was passed in California in 2010, the legislature has gone from being ranked one of the most dysfunctional in the nation to one of the most functional. For years, they had no budget, and in the last few years, they've passed a budget on time.
But I look it may be that they're able to pass the bills that they want to and get the budget passed, but it's a complete disaster. You look at people are leaving the state in droves. Companies are leaving the state in droves. They may be successful in passing measures, but when you're not listening, when you have a political entity that is just locking out the minority voice, tell you what, that's getting close to I'm not saying a dictatorship, but it's getting close, and it's a disaster. Look what's happening in San Francisco. The people are up in arms that their students can't get back in school, their children can't get back in school. We see this across the state. You have companies moving from California to Texas, a completely 180 degrees, change in direction. Can't tell me that, granted, there may be pushing the bills through, but man, it's a disaster.
Well, there's no connection between what you're describing and their adoption of Top 2. Top 2 is not to state being mainly Democratic. Top 2 means that in many of the gerrymandered districts, that there may be, in fact, 2 Democrats who get the most votes out of the couple of Republicans and a couple of Democrats and maybe an independent or 2 who run for office. The top 2 vote getters go to the general. That seems Democratic to me. In fact, if you go to Orange County or some of the more heavily Republican areas in California, there are 2 Republicans that go to the general election. So, you can't misattribute data to the election.
I have to say, like in communist countries, they also have one party. And that works, the government works at a very high level of functioning. Just look at China, that goes on there. Sure. That's a one-party country. I think that, granted, it is a mess to have 2 parties and they're butting heads like they are. But right now, I'm looking at California, and they're passing bills that their political officials have pushed through, and it's driving people out. And they've done that by silencing the minority vote. And we see it in Hollywood, that if you're a conservative, you're driven out of the industry. We see it in business, that if you're a conservative, you're driven out of business. It seems to me we need to get back to the point where we listen to the minority voice, not just the majority.
Well, let me ask this. If you've got a heavily Democratic district, will you give, say, a centrist Republican more choice by having maybe a typical liberal Democrat versus a more centrist moderate Democrat, or a choice between a typical liberal Democrat and a Republican who has 0% chance of getting elected because there's 80% registered Democrats in that district? So you can, hang on, let me finish. You can be in a district and have a traditional closed primary system with the left-wing Democrat and the right-wing Republican going to the general. But if it's a congressional seat or a state legislative seat where 80% of the registered voters belong to one party, sure, maybe you can vote, maybe you have a Republican to vote for, but if there's no chance for them to get elected, I think what the Top 2 system allows is a variety of voices to rise to the top, regardless of party affiliation. And then as a Republican, maybe you have a better choice voting for a a centrist moderate Democrat than a Republican who will never get elected. But at any rate, we're not supporting a top two system. It turns out that you really need to have 3 or 4 parties or individuals moving to the general to have choice. Because really all this election reform, what this is about nationally and in New Mexico, it's about competition, it's about choice, it's about making sure that what you're describing doesn't happen. I hate one-party systems. In fact, I'm not a fan of two-party systems. I think we should have independents running, minor parties running, and create a political system that actually gives them a remote chance of getting elected. And ranked choice voting does that. Something called proportional representation does that, where, for example, we could divide New Mexico into 4 quadrants and have 20 or 30 legislative seats in a quadrant. And if a party or a voter or a candidate hits a 5% threshold, then you get a seat in the state legislature. Versus now, as you're describing, if you're not a Democrat in 70% of New Mexico, you can't get elected. And if you're Republican in 30% of New Mexico, you can't get elected. And in fact, most New Mexicans can come together on really critical issues.
Bob,
but the parties don't talk and they don't problem solve.
Bob, I hear what you're saying. We need to break. But again, thanks for coming in today and look forward to the next segment. Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Nice, Dad.
So back to pass now as Harris steps back and fires, and he's going deep across the middle, and it's caught. Malik Phillips dancing away.
In the first half, he's been under pressure all game anyway. Smith back to pass. They're trying to set up the screen to Barker, and they've got blockers in front. Barker cuts it back. Barker in the open field, 40, 45, 50. Barker's got one man to beat. Barker may go to the house, and he will. Caden Barker Jordan Barker touchdown, Carlsbad.
But here we go. Let's see how he does.
Cabrales will kick off from the 40 and
Drives it hard.
and here they try to see that reverse again.
He fakes it.
Oh, he's got it. He's got one man to beat and a blocker in front. 35, 40, 50, 45, he's gone. There's no Hornet that will catch him. Opening kickoff return for Slade Campos, 80 yards and
Ball falls for Nava, puts it forward for Moyers. Moyers gets it past the keeper, and it's 2-1.
Denard all by himself. They're looking for him. They throw it in the end zone. Underthrown and caught. How about that? Mercy. Trevon Denard. Wow.
It's his night.
It's his night.
Up, uses that foot. No, this time she goes low, and there's a scrum there. The ball's loose, and it's up, and it's in. How about that? Going top shelf.
Good dump, and then a good wherewithal to keep it up. There's Jones on a good dig. Martinez. Huggins was blocked into a middle, kept alive, and then dumped back over. Let's keep playing, girls. Cross court this time from Cooperno. Jones sets to the outside. McIntosh was blocked. That's knocked back over. We'll continue the rally. Cooper on the right hand. Back row, and McIntosh, a little miscommunication with Lucero. Let's see if that fires up these Cougars. Harris has some time. They'll roll out looking. Harris fires on the move, and it's complete. Slipping one. It's Webskowski, and another, and it's a foot race. Shot out of a cannon. Justin Webskowski. Can he take it all the way? Touchdown.
the Jaguars. There's Smith again, cuts it back. Nice run by Smith, still on his feet, going to the end zone, touchdown.
Harris with the fake pitch, and now a run to the outside, and he's got some room. Nice move, Harris, look out. He's across the 40, a cut to midfield. He's got a blocker in front, look out. Chance Harris, shot out of a cannon, and he's gonna take it all the way. Touchdown.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich, and my guest today is Bob Perls. Bob, good having you on the program. So,
thanks for having me.
On the way down here, it was an interesting, you and I had a conversation over the phone, and we talked about making sure that eligible voters get a chance and opportunity to vote. The second one is that people that aren't entitled to vote don't vote, that only one person, one vote, one person, one vote. And then lastly, it gets back to what I'd mentioned in the last segment, also in this one, is that we make sure that we listen to the minority voice. And that isn't a minority of color of skin. We're talking about whether you're the minority party, whether you're not have a full voice, whether it's in the Santa Fe legislature or over in Washington. So the point is that I'd like to hear your thoughts on how do we make sure that when we end up with a presidential election, people will say across the country, that's my president, instead of saying the election was fraud, whether that was in 2016, whether that was in 2000, we've seen that across the board, or the last one in 2020 where people say, it's not my president, I didn't vote for him, and he got there, he's an illegitimate president. Your thoughts?
Yeah, those are profound questions, and there's not a simple answer, but let me try to dive in. First off, it's a false equivalency to compare 2016 with 2020. In 2016, there were 3 states where President Trump won with fewer than 15,000 votes. In 2020, President Biden won by 7 million votes, and there was no indication of fraud, or at least widespread fraud. And so I think you need to look at what the root cause of our hyperpolarization is. What is the root cause of the fact that most people don't trust big institutions, whether it's government, whether it's unions, whether it's big corporations? And that's a very complex issue. So one of the things you got to look at is, does our election system, the way we elect district and finance candidates, contribute to a system where candidates will actually talk to each other and problem solve? Do people feel like they're really being represented? Do people feel like they're being listened to? Most don't. Most feel very alienated from the political process.
But I hear where you're going on this, but the question really comes up is, take, for instance, the election that occurred in Iraq. If I remember right, the first election that was held in Iraq, free elections, people had to stick their finger in an inkwell, and they went around to show that they voted. It was real clear with a purple or a blue finger that, number one, you exercise your right, but number two, it became very clear who wasn't eligible to vote and did vote. So the question, if Iraq can make it so simple, why can't we do it that way? I'm not saying for us to stick a finger in an inkwell, but if that's what it takes for people to say it was a fair election.
Well, the inkwell could easily, be involved with fraud, sticking people's ink in wells. So that's kind of funny you bring that up. But again, we have to rely on some objective facts and some data-driven facts. And the facts are objectively in America, we've had some of the most secure, fraud-free elections in our history. Now, in 2016, there's some objective data to show that the Russians tried to influence the national elections.
Oh, you're not going, Bob. We've listened to that for 4 years.
Right.
That the Russians got involved. That was debunked. I don't know how many different ways, but we go back and Bob, I hear you loud and clear. Democrats in 2016 said there's problems here, here, and here. In 2020, Republicans are saying it's here, here, and here. Each are arguing a different facet of the election process. So the question that I have is that if we're going to bring people together, we need to make sure that we listen to the Democrats over here, the Republicans over here, the independents in the middle, and make sure that everybody's heard and measures are enacted to ensure that we have free, open, secure elections. And
sure.
And the American people are not on board. I hear you loud and clear saying it was all good in 2020. There's a whole group of people that are arguing with you.
Well, they may be arguing, but they have no facts backing them up. When you look at the main threats of election security, it's really twofold. One is our machines being hacked. And there aren't any states that are using internet voting. There aren't any states that are connecting voting machines to the internet. So there is good objective proof that machines aren't being hacked. So that was one concern. The second concern that Republicans specifically have made a big issue of is all mail-in ballots or mail-in voting. And 20 years ago, it was the Republicans who actually very successfully got lots of people to use absentee ballots. And mail-in voting or vote-at-home systems are nothing more than absentee ballots. And there are, in fact, many states on the left and the right, from Utah to Oregon to Colorado to most of California, who in the last 2 to 3 election cycles have successfully used mail-in voting with practically no fraud. The ballots are barcoded. They are encoded with specific people's names. They are tracked like FedEx or Amazon tracks packages. There is virtually no way to forge these ballots or to, somehow magically harvest 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 ballots and throw an election. So there actually is no proof, and I truly believe that this is the case, that there were no elections illegitimately won or lost by ballot stuffing. In fact, in the old days,
so
ballot
stuffing... out of curiosity, you saying that same thing in 2016, that President Trump won that election fairly and freely?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So one of the questions that I have is, and I think the part you brought up was the facts. And it seems like in the last probably 10 years, people have been arguing. I hear it, you've heard it, people say, this is my truth, that's your truth. We're hearing it, this is my facts, your facts. Just recently, we come to find out in New York with Governor Cuomo that with Governor Cuomo, that all of a sudden we find out that the facts that the health department, the governor was putting out, those facts were all skewed, weren't right. And then you're saying, well, then how do we know? It's awful that we're in this spot today, and people are questioning the questions of the facts. I just recently, which amazed me, Bob, was that the state of New Mexico has almost achieved 99% of vaccination rates. That is based on doses received to doses given. 99%. Utah is 10% below that. I'm saying, how in the world could New Mexico be at the bottom of every list and all of a sudden we're at the very top and we beat the closest state by 5 points? So the question comes up is, it comes back to this very point that I'm saying is, how do we make sure that we listen to the minority voice that's saying this isn't right. There's a problem here, it needs to get addressed, and not just cover it over and move on. How do we listen to those people?
Well, let's go. Those are two questions. One is, I think the reason why we're at 99% is because this administration has been heavily focused and even criticized for being so heavily focused on trying to manage the pandemic. So it sounds like we've got one of the few centralized healthcare databases in the country, and that's helped roll out the vaccines to folks who need it. Hasn't been perfect, but we've been better than many states. The second question is a really important, I think, profound question. How do you make sure minority interests are taken into account? That's why I've dedicated 6 years of volunteer time in New Mexico through New Mexico Open Elections, trying to change the way we set up our election system, because right now, minority interests aren't well protected in New Mexico. When you've got a two-party system, and as you said, I think rightfully so, often a one-party system because of gerrymandering, because of large moneyed interests, because of the expense of campaigns, because of closed primaries. There's lots of reasons why we don't have competitive elections. We've got to change the way we elect district and finance candidates to make elections more competitive. Most of us are used to looking at, in November, general election day, and the media focuses on the 5 competitive state legislative races. Well, what if we actually had 100 competitive state legislative races? That would be wonderful. And so adopting nonpartisan open primaries, adopting either campaign limits or public financing of campaigns, making sure we have an independent redistricting commission to make sure we end gerrymandering and stop protecting incumbents by creating districts that really do nothing more than make sure the incumbent can get elected and reelected. We reelect 96% of every incumbent. So there are very concrete structural changes we can make to protect minority interests, and I think that's critical.
Okay, Bob, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next segment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think the winning team here tonight will be the last 6A team in the playoffs. It's picked off. Nothing but green in front. Touchdown, Monsanto.
Hope it warms up a little.
Rolling looking, he's got some daylight in front of him at the 10, the 5. He's going to go into the end zone for the touchdown.
Get extra yards like that.
The Isaac Chavez in motion. Pavia fires down the middle, and it's Rodriguez to the 5, and he's in. Touchdown. Throwing it in the end zone. Ball is caught. Touchdown, Cowboys.
Joseph, look out! And he's gone. Forget about it. LaShawn Joseph with a house call. Touchdown, Sandia.
The winner gets to take with them, or in Western's case, keep it here. Zell Price will return. Catches it on the goal line. Price has got a little crease. One man to beat. Price might be gone. Price is in the open field and will score on a 98-yard kickoff return. Zell Price at Eastern New Mexico 32-yard line. Fowler in the gun. Pump fake to Colson. He's got him open. Colson with the move at the 10. He'll go in for the touchdown. 32-yard touchdown pass.
Malik comes out wide to the left this time on 2nd down and 10. They're going to throw it out to him. Up the sideline he goes. Malik is off to the races. Ain't nobody going to catch him. It's 6-0 the Clovis Wildcats. Been a touchdown, but in any event, it's 4th and 10. Rolling, looking, throws it out, incomplete. Ball will go over on downs with 1:11 to go, and for the first time this year, New Mexico Highlands will be in the victory position, victory kneel down position.
And look at this shot out of a cannon. All the way is Gallegos for his 3rd touchdown tonight.
Don't sacrifice quality and flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations, or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Welcome back to The Point with Mick Rich. I have Bob Perls here with me. Bob, we talked earlier on the way when I drove down here to the studio about this last segment. It's about how do we turn our state around. I was fortunate enough to have my letter published. How do we take our state from the bottom 10 to the top 10 and do it in 10 years? Bob, you've been involved in politics, been involved in New Mexico for quite some time. I'd like to hear, what are your thoughts? How do we turn our state around?
You know, it's a profoundly difficult question. I think we start with what I talked about in earlier segments. We've fundamentally changed the way we elect district and finance candidates, because unless we change our politics to reward compromise and reward coalition building and elect candidates who have to reach out to left, right, and center from the very beginning and not just talk to their base, we're going to end up in gridlock and continued gridlock. And we're going to elect a Democrat one time, do a bunch of work, elect a Republican the next time, the pendulum swings, and there's no consistency, there's no consensus. And yet, you know, at the neighborhood level, if you want to solve a problem with skunks or dogs or getting your street paved, you know, 95% of neighbors can come together and solve problems. But instead, in politics, we have 2 warring factions, and we expect them to beat each other up every election, period, and then come together and solve problems. And that doesn't work. So rather than talking about, you know, tax policy or entrepreneurship or education, the number one solution is change the way we structure our political system. That's my number one.
Okay.
And I can go to 2 and 3 when you're ready.
Yeah, I'd like to hear number 2.
Okay. Number 2 is, and again, this may sound boring, this is more process. Change the way we organize and run the legislature. Copy Nebraska, where it's unicameral. There's no reason to have 2 different, a House, Senate. They just delay and don't pass legislation in a timely way. We need a full-time paid elected legislature. We need term limits. We need proportionally elected or nonpartisan elected legislature. Nebraska, for example, you don't have Republicans and Democrats serving. You have patriots and citizens serving, working together, no party designation. People come together in Nebraska in the legislature based on areas of expertise, and leadership is based on competency, not on seniority. So if we fundamentally change the way the legislature runs, it will be more effective, it'll represent the public better, and it will move this state forward.
It seems, Bob, I understand what you're saying. I look at New Mexico, I look at the roundhouse, how dysfunctional it is. What I see is that the Democrats have almost a complete lock in the House and the Senate. They've got the governor's spot, and they ran through their measures without taking time to listen to the minority. Prime example would be this last bill that was passed, the abortion bill that allows New Mexico, 80% of New Mexicans do not support abortion up to the point of delivery. You can flip that number around and say 80% of New Mexicans support abortion in the first, 2 trimesters, but not in the last trimester. And the legislature, the governor, has just passed over all of them. And I don't mean to be focusing on that, but also at the same time, we're looking at crime. And, Republicans are known for law and order, right? But I go back and I look, Bob, you were here in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, when, what was his name? Weller, the baseball player at UNM, he was shot and killed on Central. I saw the video of it, the security camera of the shooting of it. That gentleman, I'm not going to call him a gentleman, but the person that was tagged with the murder, the homicide, here it is 2 years later, nothing's happened to him. He is in prison for serving a sentence for a lesser charge on a different crime. Should have never been out on the street. Crime is front and center for people in Albuquerque, front and center with people across the state. And the legislature is doing their thing. And not once has the Democrats or Republicans come together to work that out. And I would think that at least they come together and say, we got it. And it's not a matter of cleaning up our streets. It's about making safe neighborhoods. Bob, what do you think that the legislature doesn't look at safe neighborhoods as a priority?
Well, of course they do. Let's go back to your original question, though, and that is, you mentioned that Democrats ran legislation through. That's exactly focusing on changing the candidates are elected, the way the legislature functions, because the Republicans in our memory in the last 20 years controlled the legislature. They have controlled the House, and they treated the Democrats the same way. McConnell, when he controlled the U.S. Senate, treated the Democrats the same way. And both parties are wrong. I'm not going to just try to protect minority interests. That's part of the debate around the national filibuster bill in the U.S. Senate. So rather than talking about abortion and crime right now, you asked me what I think the best way is to fix New Mexico and move it forward. The way to fix it is fix the way the legislature runs, fix the way we elect candidates, so that they can do what you're suggesting, and that is have a rational conversation, a data-driven conversation, solve New Mexico's problems, stop posturing, stop worrying about trying to get reelected, and do the people's work.
So is that so what's your third idea? Just data-driven?
So third, no, third really, I'm going to, as an entrepreneur, primarily I'm a private sector guy, even as a U.S. diplomat with the State Department, is radically changing our education system. And, my wife and I have co-founded one of the charter schools in town, Public Academy for Performing Arts. I'm a big believer in charter schools. As a state rep, I founded the charter school bill that created charter schools in New Mexico. So we need to invest more money, more control, more autonomy at the community level. I'd love to see every school be a charter school where the community, the teachers, the parents, the older students help run the schools, bypass the bureaucracy within the large school districts. I think we need to radically change the way we train teachers. I think most colleges of education are a waste of time. We need to have teachers who are expert in school subjects. And then we need to look at countries like Germany, for example, where you have an early tracking system where students who want to make a living get great technical training, whether it's in renewable energy technology, whether it's learning how to code, so you really have 2 tracks where we have great technical training and we have much higher standards to get into college instead of using college as another 4 years of parking students. So it really has to do with how do we create a national class, a world-class workforce in New Mexico to help our homegrown businesses and attract out-of-state businesses. And it gets down to really radically retuning our education system, how we train teachers, how we reward teachers. We should have the best and brightest teaching. We should be doubling teachers' salaries. We should be counseling the lowest third of teachers out of the teaching profession if we need to, and then making sure students actually leave school with a trade or with the ability to get into some of the best colleges in the nation.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with you on charter schools. I helped start one of the first vocational charter high schools in Albuquerque. It was a great program, made a difference in a huge number of people. Our youngest daughter attended a charter school, but our oldest, our children went to public school, they went to Catholic school, they went to charter schools. So I see a wide range of choices here, but the part that amazes me, that here it is when we look at public schools, and public schools pay more than Catholic schools to their teachers. The public schools are still shut down. APS is still shut down. Catholic schools are open. Private schools are open. The APS is shut down. They get more money than the other teachers do. And it looks like to me that the problem, the disconnect is that and my thoughts are here, is that we need to give parents rights, and that is a union for our parents and students where they have a say in how the schools are run, because they're not. They are at and I'm not out here to talk about teachers' unions. At the same time, we look at the teachers' unions supporting the teachers. They want more money. We keep paying our teachers more and more and not getting any more. We're now opening it up and saying K through 12 is a failure. Now we want to give the state to take a look at pre-K. And I'm saying, if it's a disaster for K through 12, why do we think that it's going to be not a disaster? We got to break the cycle. I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, good. I think their schools represents sort of parent, teacher, student union that you talk about. It can be collaboratively run. It doesn't have to be us versus them. It doesn't have to be teachers or administration versus the parents or versus the community. Charter schools are a great template to show how communities can come together, use best practice. And let's face it, we've got a very diverse community in New Mexico. We have diverse needs. We need schools that are equally diverse. We're still teaching schools like a 1950s model where all students are treated exactly the same, taught the same stuff, often to the lowest common denominator, and it simply does not work.
I understand. Bob, hey, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me. It was a good conversation. I always enjoy that give and take. You'll learn more from that.
Yeah, thanks so much. I enjoyed it, and best of luck with your show. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in today. This is Mick Rich, To The Point.